In just 3 days, the popular app TikTok could be gone for good. That's if it doesn't win a challenge in the Supreme Court or find an American owner by Sunday. So what happens if it shuts down? We're joined now by Zach Schoenfeld, courts and legal reporter at The Hill, to talk more about this. So Zach, thanks for joining us. The Supreme Court released opinions yesterday, but did not release a ruling on TikTok. So with the ban set to go into effect Sunday, is this it? Or could we see something from the Supreme Court in the next 2 days?
We still could see something from the Supreme Court, but there would have to be some last-minute shakeup. So as of right now, the court is not scheduled to get back on the bench until next week, after this ban goes into effect on Sunday. But that's not to say that things couldn't change. We've seen before, when the court hears some of these cases on such an expedited schedule, like they are for the TikTok case, that they will add an additional opinion day. So for example, last year, when we had that very expedited case over the efforts to kick Donald Trump off the ballot under the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause, that was an example of where we saw the court, that opinion came down on the Monday morning. The court didn't tell us until the Sunday afternoon beforehand that they were going to release an opinion the next day. So I keep checking. As of now, still no opinion day tomorrow, but things could change. And then also, even if they don't take the bench tomorrow, they could still issue an emergency ruling at any time.
Okay, so it is still possible. That's interesting. We know that Trump is reportedly eyeing an executive order regarding TikTok. Do we know anything more about this, how this would work? Does he have real legal authority to suspend this ban? I mean, how would this happen?
Yeah, his legal authority here is a bit unclear because the law is set to take effect on Sunday, the day before he takes office. That's by no coincidence. And it only, as of now, would give President Biden authority to issue a delay if he finds that TikTok is on its way to divestment. But the law wouldn't give President Trump any authority. But the question then becomes, once he takes office, once he takes control of the Justice Department, this is something that actually came up at the arguments at the Supreme Court, could his administration decide that they're just not going to enforce this ban that would require places like Apple, Google, these app stores to remove the app from their platform? So then the question would become, will Apple just go along with it, or will they still be concerned enough to take TikTok off their app store?
Yeah, well, so much to think about. So what happens come Sunday? Is it a real possibility that TikTok does shut down until the Supreme Court rules? I mean, it seems like a pretty big deal since it has so many users and is such a popular app in the U.S.
Yeah, TikTok has been arguing that if this law goes into effect as scheduled on Sunday, that they are effectively going to, quote, go dark, is what the attorney said at the oral arguments. We know that this law would ban, as I said, places like Apple and Google from allowing people to download the app. They couldn't allow updates. There still would be a potential that people who already have TikTok downloaded on their phones, that it wouldn't just disappear from their phones one day. Now, TikTok has reportedly said that they're just going to shut down everything in the U.S., but the government here has accused TikTok of effectively playing a game of chicken, saying that they're saying this is going to be a doomsday scenario for the platform, but they say wait until we get close to Sunday, maybe things will change course at the 11th hour.
Yeah, interesting. It will be interesting to see what happens. But I want to shift gears here to another Supreme Court case, this one regarding a Texas age verification law for adult websites. What's at stake in this case?
Yeah, this case involves the law, specifically in Texas, but there are similar laws now that have been passed in almost 20 states across the country. So almost half the country that requires these adult websites to verify the age of their users. So for example, having folks send in a photo of their ID. And it is now coming under a First Amendment challenge, saying that that violates the porn industry's First Amendment free speech rights. And what was really striking to me about this argument this week is this was the first time really in 2 decades that the court has really had to deal with the world of pornography. And compared to when they had the last case that they had back in 2004, you saw the justices taking a very different approach at the arguments. Back in that 2004 case, they were pointing to, telling these companies that you don't need the age verification because there are other alternatives out there. For example, content filtering methods that allow parents to block content on their specific kids' devices. But we saw at the arguments this week, especially from folks like Justice Amy Coney Barrett, she said that the last 2 decades have shown that that doesn't work anymore. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
It's been 20 years since Ashcroft. The iPhone was introduced in 2007, and Ashcroft was decided in 2004. I mean, kids can get online porn through gaming systems, tablets, phones, computers. Let me just say that content filtering for all those different devices, I can say from personal experience, is difficult to keep up with.
And she does have a lot of personal experience. Justice Barrett has 7 kids, I should mention.
Yeah, she would know.
So certainly the justices bring their own experiences to the table at these arguments.
Yeah, and she's not wrong that things have changed in the past couple decades. Last question for you, this one about Rudy Giuliani. He's also in court today, facing trial in New York, though. So can you talk to us a little bit about what's on the line for him in this case? We know that there is a condo in Palm Beach on the line and some New York Yankees World Series rings a part of this, but what else is he facing here?
Yeah, we actually just got a breaking development in this case just a few moments ago, and it now actually seems that this trial will no longer be moving forward. So earlier today, we were all asking questions because the trial was set to begin this morning, but Giuliani was nowhere to be found in that New York City courthouse. So things stalled all morning, and just before you and I started talking, we got an update on the docket. It was signed by lawyers on both parties, both sides of this, the election workers and Giuliani. They said that they have now reached a settlement agreement, both as for the World Series rings that have been in contention here, as well as his Florida condo. There's not a lot of details in this. It's just a quick letter saying that they have reached a settlement that, quote, would fully resolve all issues currently scheduled for trial. Still waiting to hear more details of what is actually in this settlement agreement, but it seems that this big trial that we thought was going to happen for Rudy Giuliani today, the parties have settled.
That's interesting. I'm interested to hear what that settlement entails. Hopefully we'll learn some more details. Zach Schoenfeld, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Bianca.
President Biden bid farewell to the nation last night in an Oval Office address and is closing the door on politics after serving half a century in the government. But what do Americans think of Biden as he wraps up his term as president? Plus, President-elect Donald Trump is set to take office in 4 days, with perhaps his most ambitious agenda to date. In the midst of this, the president-elect has been dealing with legal entanglements of his own, with the sentencing in his New York hush money case, and Americans are divided politically on the trial. Here to break down the numbers is Senior Director of Emerson College Polling, Matt Taglia. Matt, President Biden delivered his farewell address last night, saying goodbye to millions of Americans as he leaves the White House. And according to the latest Emerson College Polling national survey, 70% of Democrats approve of his job as president, 10% of Republicans approve, and 33% of independents. So how does this compare to when he took office back in January of 2021?
Yeah, and our final poll is unfortunately some bad news for President Biden. 37% overall approve of his job performance, 52% disapprove. These are near historic lows, stable for roughly the past month. If we look back to 2021 in February, when we first measured his job performance after taking office, we saw 49% approved, 39% disapproved. So we've seen a net 25-point change towards the negative for President Biden here. We also saw back then 86% of Democrats approved of his job performance versus 70% now. So it's a 16-point decline. Independent numbers are slightly worse than they were in 2021. But I think the bottom line here is that President Biden is down all over, including within his own party. Aggregate numbers even show him slightly worse than Trump was when he left office in 2021.
Yeah, certainly puts his legacy into question, but President-elect Donald Trump made history last week, becoming the first convicted felon to enter the White House, and he was handed down an unconditional discharge in his New York City hush money case. And his conviction highlights a partisan divide. So what does your polling show on which way different political parties are leaning on this?
Yeah, so overall, 55% think that the trial was appropriate to hold Trump accountable. 45% say that it was a political witch hunt. So, as you might expect, 87% of Democrats say that the trial was appropriate versus just 21% of Republicans. Independents overall fit somewhere in the middle. 57% say that it was appropriate. So, there is a majority there. Another way of looking at this, 95% of Harris voters in 2024 say that the trial was appropriate, while just 16% of Trump voters say the same. So this is not a consensus, but the balance does tip toward folks believing that the trial was appropriate to hold Trump accountable.
Matt Taglia of Emerson College Polling, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Republican Party has again maintained its popularity over the Democrats in 2024, edging out their rival political party and the amount of Americans who identify with the GOP. 46% of respondents consider themselves either Republican or Republican-leaning independent, according to a new Gallup survey published Thursday. But the margins are razor thin. 45% of respondents consider themselves a Democrat or Democratic-leaning independent. The survey marks the third consecutive year the GOP superseded the Democrats. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Bianca Fascini. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.